Hey everybody, welcome to another Wiser Wednesday. So today we're discussing systems, and fantastic topic. We might geek out a bit today. What we're really trying to do is to help you understand why we're so passionate about systems and why we've seen systems work in trying to scale startups, SMEs all the way through. Right? It's so important, but it takes a certain mindset and a certain desire to want to go on that journey. I'm James Potten. I believe in a world of entrepreneurial success without burnout. Got the t-shirt slightly charred. We're speaking today with the backdrop of deregulation here in the UK. The jury's out on the effects of this. But look, I personally love systems. I guess one of the best examples that I use is exited my environmental consultancy in 2016. We had about 40 people in the photo, and we were about a 12 million turnover business at that time. Roll the clock forward 5 years, 2021. There's another photo of about 40 people and only 8 of the same team members. So, and actually the turnover had nearly doubled in that time. So the CEO who took over from me, James, he said, look, you put in like the systems, the SOPs, or the foundations that allowed us to just drive the growth of the organization. So I think it's really important like message there, in that if you do spend the time and find the way to do enough but not too much systems, then you can really power a business forward. So right, so Kelly had a really good suggestion. If you had an extra hour in the day, what would you do with it? So if you put that in the chat, if we get a chance at the end, we'll read through some of them. First up, let's just quick intro to the panelists. I also get them to introduce themselves. But so Kelly Goss, founder of Solver, author of Automated with Zapier. So you recently did a DNA test and found out you have heritage from 11 different regions. I thought there were only 7, so this is amazingly impressive. So Zane Daniel, founder of ML Sense. You saved companies over 23 million through data services in recent years. You love road trips. You once drove from Calais to Valencia in one go, so you've been especially hit in the petrol prices at the moment. Hugo Cox, founder of HC5 Systems. You're business process consultant and automator. You've married your wife 3 times, and your middle name is also Mendelssohn, as in the your great grandfather who wrote the wedding march. So I'm hoping you're on commission. I don't think you've actually married her 3 times. You had 3 ceremonies, but hey. And Vinay Panton. Can I put my tongue back? Can you suggest Pantanta? Is it?
Petanka.
Katanka, thank you. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay, awesome. So, look, founder of Process Street. So amazing to have you on here. Former Silicon Valley, now San Diego. Although you're calling in from Portugal today, you've raised over 15 million in recent years. And Vinny, you met your co-founder in a hotel in Buenos Aires. So you've been to almost as many regions as Kelly's DNA. So amazing panel here today. Just to set the mood, a bun fight is a fun night. So jump in with questions to each other if you want to. We're also live, so ideally no swearing, but passion is welcome. So look, can you each do an intro, less than a minute, tell us your journey to how you are, where you are today. So I'll start with Zane.
Basically, journey-wise, started ML Sense about 3 years ago, and sort of thought that, there's a lot of things that I could do, and in terms of helping companies save a lot of money that are with problems that are very much similar across the board. And that's what sort of drove me to start a consultancy and basically help companies save money and improve their processes. These are basically data engineering pipelines and cloud infrastructure sort of work. So yeah, and last year I calculated all the savings we had done, and that was basically about 23 million. And that was a massive figure. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I haven't done a recent calculation yet. It's probably more. So yeah.
That's great, Zane. Thank you. So look, really looking forward to hearing from you today. Kelly, you're up next on my screen.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kelly Goss. I have a background in process improvement in pharmaceutical and medical device. That was my original first job in microbiology, actually. And I then opened a business with an ex-partner of mine, which was a veterinary practice, which was super, super unproductive. We had the right legacy systems in place, but we had no proper processes, really bad, well, no automation in place. And we were spending like 60, 70 hour, 80 probably hour weeks doing VAT returns on a Sunday before they were due. And when I left that business, I was totally burnt out. I mean, this is sounding a little bit similar to James's story. But I realized that there were better ways of doing things. I had a lot of small business experience by that point, and all my process experience as well. And I started helping businesses to automate their accounting processes, first of all. Then I came across Zapier, which helps you to connect all these different tools together because it integrates with lots of different cloud-based tools. And that totally blew my mind. And now it's, 6, 7 years later, I've written a book. I'm launching a course to help people to learn about better systems, processes, and automation. And I help businesses to do exactly that, to be more productive and to be able to scale cost effectively and quickly with all of those things in place. So awesome. That's me.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Vinay, you're up next.
Hey, everyone. So I'm Vinay. I'm the CEO of Process Street. We are a process management platform. We help teams manage employee onboarding, approvals, workflow automation, the team's handbook, and a lot more. So we're kind of like an all-in-one process management platform to take all the knowledge of your organization, as well as take that knowledge and automate all the different tasks associated with it across the business. My story is I've been doing this for a long time. I actually originally built Process Street with my co-founder, who I met in a hostel in Buenos Aires, as an internal tool for our last company. And similar kind of stories to James and Kelly. I was really feeling the pain of like not having good systems in place and was looking for a solution. But kind of as we've worked on it over the years, what we've really noticed is there seems to be a bit of a bad wrap around processes. There's a lot of focus on like project management and like, let's do projects and launch this product and do this and do that. But like people kind of don't pay enough attention to processes, especially when they're smaller businesses and new teams kind of like just figuring things out. But when you think about it, most of the most impressive businesses in the world, the majority of what they do is process. It's like Amazon sending a package or SpaceX launching a rocket. It's like, it's not like some new project that you're kind of doing. In fact, like when you're working on projects, you're probably burning a lot of resources doing stuff and figuring stuff out that you then end up throwing away. So we kind of really are on this mission of trying to get people to stop throwing away their work, stop focusing on projects, and get serious about process.
Awesome. All right, great. Thanks, Vinny. I was looking forward to hearing from you as well. And Hugo.
Hi, Hugo from 5HC. So I'm kind of new to this game on the tech side of it. I've spent my whole career doing a whole variety of things, from being in the British Army to working in construction, project management, manufacturing, quality management, and so on. And what that did is gave me a massive breadth of experience with different sort of systems and processes in organizations, big and small, and good and bad. I then joined a company a couple of years ago to sort of overhaul all of their systems, but I was quite new to the technical side of it, and employed someone called Kelly, who is on your screen at the moment, to help with the Zapier side of it and sort of give me a few tips and tricks. I then sort of got massively into that and implemented a bunch of systems and connected them all up and so on. And I was always chasing her to give me a job. And then she said, why don't you go and do it yourself? So I did. So a couple of years on, I'm still doing that. So I'm helping companies, tie together their different platforms. And I'm also building a lot of my own platforms using various no-code or low-code things. But I think having that background in the operational side of it is hugely important. A lot of the time, clients come to me saying, I want you to do this. And then when you actually dig into it, that's not what they want at all. When you look at the bigger picture. So yeah, that's me. Helping generally small to medium businesses, grow or move on to that next gear get away from, lots of spreadsheets and so on, and just helping them kind of dedicate their brain power to actually earning money and doing stuff, not just juggling or doing the same stuff they did last month and then forgot how they did it. To one of your points earlier, James.
Yeah, no. All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Hugo. Yeah, looking forward to hear your sort of thoughts on this as well. So, look, quite a big question to start with to you, Kelly. So, what do we mean by systems? And how can they help like a founder build a business?
So, I think what most people traditionally thought systems meant were the hardware, local area network, and the desktop software that you had in the business. And that's still, for some businesses, that is still a thing where businesses are not using any kind of cloud-based applications. But now, most people, when they hear the word systems, they think of two different things. So I'll get to the process side in a minute. I think they confuse systems and process. So what a lot of people think about now when you say, I have this system in my business, they don't really think about the hardware that you have. That's kind of expected that we're going to have that in the business. But people are thinking generally, what are all the different tools that I use in the business that are helping me to satisfy what I have to do on a daily basis to get clients, sell to my clients, onboard my clients, do my finance processes. So I guess the millennial term for that now is app stack. So it's generally all the different software packages that people have within the business that create this app stack, which then is referred to or as your systems. And then what I think some people get confused about is what the difference between systems and processes are. And I'm sure Vinay can add to this as well. But I think some people get confused that processes are actually the systems, but the process are the tasks that people have to go through in the systems to accomplish what they need to do. So that I think is really important to mention, because there is a difference between a system and a process.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Others welcome to jump in here. Vinny, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I also think that there's a little bit of there isn't consistency in some of the terminology across different industries and just different countries and just kind of different people might call one thing. There's not an exact kind of system between a procedure, a process, or a system. I see those things kind of you can go and find the official terminology, but I hear people misusing or interchanging those words all the time. So it can get a little bit tricky. But yeah, to me, the process is the system is kind of a child element in the process. The process kind of explains everything that's going on. That could include interacting with the system. It could include interacting with a person or something else. And the process is kind of guiding that entire stream of work. But I think at a higher level, to kind of think about the difference between, say, project and process, right? And maybe within process, you're including systems and procedures. It's about doing work it's repetitive work, the recurring work that happens over and over again. And it's applying a way to do that work in a way that is optimized in some way. So you've understood that there are certain things to watch out for. You've understood there are certain ways to improve the quality, and those get encoded into that process in some way so that the output is higher quality, it's more efficient, it's more compliant, whatever it is. You're not kind of making these kind of things up as you go or trying and kind of making errors along the way. You're kind of taking the stuff that you've already learned and figured out, those errors, those optimizations, and then you're turning it into kind of an encoded way to ensure that happens each time that task kind of gets done in the business.
Great. Is there sort of, the what and the how sort of going on? Are we talking about the how with an interest, and you didn't call it System Street, right? So you see process as being the thing at the top of this, driving the decisions in what the systems need to be. Yeah. So and how do companies balance that? So how we do it and what we're doing?
Well, companies balance it in all sorts of different ways, depending on how mature they are in their kind of process and systems journey. But I think ultimately you've got both in place, right? You've got really strong systems in place, and then you've got guidelines on how to interact with those systems and how to utilize those systems to get the most out of them and get the most out of your investment in those systems.
Yeah. Great. Hugo?
Yeah, I think probably from my background, I sort of would take a step back further. For me, a system's more just a way of achieving a consistent and predictable result, and that's a combination of your people, your hardware, and your software. So even something like walking into a restaurant and then having a system of you greet the person, you take their coat, you take them to the table, you ask them how the day was, you give them a plate of olives or whatever. To me, that is a system, and you give them a certain cutlery and a certain layout. Just it's a way of achieving that consistent result that is, predictable and constant, and it's written down. Everyone does it the same way, so on. So I think nowadays everything, or a lot of these things, result in, or the mechanism is the software and the tools and the app stack and so on. But to me, a lot of the clients I work with, that you're addressing it, further back still, and just looking at what they're trying to achieve from, going and picking some stuff out of a warehouse or whatever. So it's not just the desktop side of it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you're getting into then outcomes and, what's the outcome they're trying to achieve and working from that position.
Yeah, very much so.
Great. Okay, thank you. Zane?
Yeah, I would agree with Hugo as well. Basically, the outcomes part, and also just it depends on what you're trying to achieve, and you have to sort of set up processes or systems based on what your need is, based on what the end result is, and how rigorous it needs to be in terms of reporting or in terms of financials. Yeah, that's what I would agree on that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So if we move on to, is there anything anyone else wants to say on this point, or happy to move on? So to you, Vinay, I guess why is it so hard to implement, a systems process mindset within an organization? What are some of the, what are the challenges we're up against?
Yeah. So I would say that's an interesting question, because I'd say there aren't really any businesses that hit a certain scale who don't have strong processes in place. It's kind of like a business will break, any organization will break when it hits a certain size without processes. You just won't be able to function. So you don't really see a business that's more than a few hundred people that doesn't have lots of processes in place, because they literally can't get to that size. So you more see this kind of challenge when there's this kind of growth phase from whatever size business, a 1 to 50. And that's kind of where a company might go from having no idea or no processes in place to hitting different pain points as they grow, to then need to figure out systems, and it might start with oh, we need an email account, or we need to pay our first employee, or we need to get paid, or something, right? And then over time, it's we need to manage bigger teams, we need to handle more customers, we need to handle more financing, we need to handle operations, blah blah blah, and all these new pain points that kind of happen as a business grows kind of trigger new systems that need to get figured out and deployed to solve those problems.
Yeah. Okay, great. And we certainly have that challenge, I'd say, in the UK, maybe more so than in Europe, the EU, where I think they're slightly more accepting of systems, but in the UK we definitely have eyes rolling when you start talking about systems, sort of yawn. So yeah, it's but as you say, you don't have larger organizations even over 10, 15 is really hard without something in place. So does anyone else want to sort of jump in and with their view on why it's so hard to implement?
Yeah. So yeah, I was just going to say, it's the what I see is what happens is because of people, right? People are used to even if it's to do with managing tasks, say Monday.com or Asana, right? the thing is that if some people are used to one software, switching from one to another, it's a major problem. And it's a major problem of learning and getting used to, and everyone not knowing the shortcuts and all of those things, or getting the app to install, or getting the right URL. And there's so many things that can happen just by changing something or implementing something. So yeah, it's the biggest thing is that with any software implementation, it's the people. You have to do the onboarding, you have to do the training, and that training often, in order to get the right sort of success, often means one-on-one training. You can't do like say 25 people in a room and say, okay, here's the new software, here's how it works, or send a video and say, this is how you sign up, good luck, and see you in the new software. That doesn't work. So you have to basically hold hand and walk with them, and then make sure that they're used to it. And then basically that's the sort of onboarding is a major part in a large organization, even in a small one. I remember just signing up to Superhuman. It's an email app, which is a great email app. It lets me go through so many emails, probably 500 emails in less than 15 minutes. It's great. It's designed so that you can go through emails very, very quickly. But it took me a while. I just could not get, and I'm a software engineer from background, right? And like I use a lot of softwares. I'm really tech savvy, extremely tech savvy. I have a lot of gear. But even then, that software took me a while just to get used to it. But now that I'm used to it, I do actually get through about 500 emails in 15 minutes. It's just
get
that
you to look through mine for me. It's amazing.
you should sign up to Superhuman. So
Yeah.
the thing is that it's just the onboarding phase. It's the most difficult part. You have to do it properly.
Yeah. It's like that change management kind of like process is really difficult. Like getting a team to kind of switch from not having to remember to do something or not doing something in a certain way to doing something in a new way. I think so. Like for us, the biggest challenge that we basically see from like our feedback and our surveys from our customers is I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to implement systems. I don't have enough time to write this process. I don't have enough time to migrate my team over to this new tool because I'm busy doing something else. That also, not enough time is just also another way of saying like, it's not a priority. Like there are other priorities that are more important in my business and my team. This basically kind of is like the E-Myth story. It basically happens in small businesses when you're going from this like 1 to 50 kind of range, because like you usually are very under-resourced as a small business. Like there's more stuff to do. You don't have as many support people. You don't have as many like of these systems figured out, and you don't have the people to like run these systems. And so, the classic story of like the entrepreneur at night on the weekends doing their taxes, stories that you two just told, Kelly and James. And so I think that's the combination of like, I don't have enough time. It's not a priority. There's other stuff on fire that I've got to deal with. And I think that is the most common reason why people struggle to implement systems. And then I think with that, and which is something that opens up when businesses get larger, a different way to also potentially frame that is like they just don't have the money or the resources to spend. Like, yeah, you could hire a Kelly and she could come in and build amazing systems for you, but it's not going to be free. It's not going to be cheap. So if you don't have that additional capital to invest in the business, that also becomes a restraint. Whereas if you're a 50-person company, hiring a process consultant becomes a lot more affordable, relatively speaking, to the revenue of the business and whatnot. And so, yeah, it just is. There's these kind of like time and resource and capital problems as a business is growing that just make it a challenge to implement.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks. Yeah, sorry, Hugo, you were.
Yeah, it's something I found, and it's more with sort of middle management or project managers, is people don't like to feel like they're becoming a McDonald's. They feel it's stifling their creative flair, if you like. People want to be able to give them the task to do and do it how they want. Whereas if they're told, no, you have to do it in this sequence, following these steps, they sort of don't like it. Once they're used to it, that changes massively. But I think that then leads on to the importance of the change management thing that Vinny mentioned, and selling it and creating that buy-in before you even roll the system out. But that feeling of people that they're becoming de-skilled because they're having to just follow a load of steps rather than just go and do it how you think is best. That's something I've sort of come up against. Whereas people who are more at the lower level, they're really happy with it. They're used to it, and they I'm not trying to sound derogatory. They like being given a set of steps and told how to do their daily tasks and crack on.
Yeah, I mean it's really common like challenge. So people feel like, also there's a fear around their job, right? So they're fearing like, well, if we systematize, does it mean that my job is not going to be, around? And, it takes a lot of convincing with teams to say, actually, what we want you to do is to be doing more of the creative stuff, to try and, spend more time with the customer, like engage in, like, in theory, the fun stuff and the stuff that adds value, and let the machine, run it. And if any of you come across like the pizza manufacturing game, so it's a way to sort of get teams, get 2 or 3 teams of like 5 or whatever, and they manufacture pizzas, and the first time putting the pineapple on. I know you shouldn't have pineapple on pizza, but all of that, like they're basically putting like stuff on, and then like it's just madness. And then the next time you say, right, try and think about how you might optimize. And what's the most interesting thing is by the third time, they've all worked out that if they each have a stage, then they can look at the bottlenecks or whatever, and they can then say, okay, right, well, we've actually, like, the thing here that's like throttling this is this part. So they work it out, but also the room's silent. The room's really quiet once they've all kind of worked out who's doing what in that game. It's a really like effective way to get a group, like a team, to realize, yeah, it might not be like the fun days in your startup of like the craziness, but you actually are way more effective as a business. So sort of jumped in with that anecdote, but yeah, Kelly, like, what's your thoughts?
I think another thing that people probably struggle with is not knowing where to start. So not having a proper framework to understand how you can properly implement systems in the business without having, again, to pay somebody to help you with that. And the fact that when it comes to software systems, it's not like it was 10 years ago where, for X industry, you have 1 or 2 different software tools that you can choose from. A consultant will come in and implement it for you. Now we've got this situation where software as a service has exploded, and there are thousands and thousands of tools on the market. How do you choose what to put in place? So I think it's also a little bit overwhelming for businesses that are trying to put in place new systems, because they might not really know where to start. And another thing as well is, again, the cost that they think is associated with putting new systems in place, the cost that's associated with training, the cost that's associated with downtime, the costs that are associated with employing a consultant, like Vinay mentioned. And I'm not sure if this situation is available in the US or in other countries, but a lot of businesses don't realize that in the UK, the government has actually provided funding to different counties and councils to help small and medium-sized businesses with their systems. So you can actually apply for grants to get funding to work with consultants, or to help with the software costs and hardware costs and that kind of thing. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that there is help available out there as well.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Well, if you've got any links, we'll put them into the messaging. Happy to do that. So I've just, like Vinny's, we'll put your post into the links as well.
Yeah, that's just a post I recommend for anyone listening. Just Google "giving away your Legos." It's a really good post on the idea that it's actually much more beneficial for your career to build systems and help like the company that you're working for grow and become more efficient than it is to kind of just like stay in the job and not deliver as much value to the business.
Yeah. It's a huge, especially if there's a culture that's sort of embedded already. People kind of, there's a protectionist sort of piece going on. You actually have to, yeah, it's really difficult to unlock that in a business if it's already embedded and set in. It's so hard to start to try to like get people to open up and be willing to document what they do. Basically, you see it so often that is not you don't have the coalition of the willing when you start on that journey. So Hugo, can we dig into what's the sort of steps that you think that a leader could go about when they're looking at implementing both a system, but this is also thinking about a that almost mindset, a process mindset within an organization.
I guess that's a pretty expansive question, but the way I'd answer that is that one of the most critical things in that, you're already going to be carrying out a certain process that you want to systemize it, be it your sales or delivery or whatever. And the biggest thing for me is just to get the doers involved. So not the boss who's telling you, who's employing you, not the director or the company owner, the people on the shop floor, the people that are actually doing the job. Because the chances are the boss isn't going to have done that activity for some time, or they're going to have a skewed view of it. But also by involving the people on the shop floor, you gain that buy-in, so that when the system, you're going to end up with a better defined need or scope, or however you want to describe it, but you've already got that buy-in. So when you go to roll the system out, you've already won half the battle of that resistance. People feel like they have some ownership of it. And that can be anything from a software platform that they've helped with the configuring of, or something more bespoke, or how to go and get stuff off the shelves, or how to make a door or whatever. So for me, that's a massive part of it, I think, just to get that buy-in. That'd be my initial thought.
That's great. Like thinking back to sort of Six Sigma days, it was about getting enough people involved, like a higher spend up front, to then not have the legacy spend, like tech debt over time. It's about, trying to engage enough people so they all feel part of the solution.
Yeah. The people are such a critical part of a system. I've seen it. We've all seen it, where you get some amazing new bit of software or whatever, and just because of that resistance to change, people are too busy. Like has been said before, all those typical excuses, and they all build up. All those typical reasons, they all build up, and then this big project that you spent tens or hundreds or whatever £1,000 on just falls flat on its face, because it wasn't that engagement, that communication, that change management wasn't done properly in the first place. I think another point for me, and I know not everyone will probably agree with this, but I'm not a big fan of very, very defined scopes, because in my experience, people don't really know what they want until they've seen even a proof of concept. Then they're like, I see what you're talking about now. Oh, can we add this here? Can we make it do this? Now, but if you ask for someone from the offset to say exactly what they want every screen and window and table to look like, I think people find that quite overwhelming. So I find in a lot of projects, the first third is that proof of concept, and then the tweaking, adjusting as you go through is almost a larger part than the initial build. I was slightly off piece there. Apologies.
Yeah, no. It's really relevant. Zane, what do you think? What do you see is usually the catalyst in trying to explore a better way of doing things?
Well, the thing is that often it's a difficult one, because often what happens is, when you're using a system, when you're using, say, if we go back to the email example, if you're already using an email software, it works fine, then it's difficult to see why should we change. What made it change for me was the time, basically, because it takes a very long time to go through emails. And having seen that software works for a lot of people, and that they saved a lot of time, I was like, well, you know what? I have to invest in learning how that works. So it's basically the time. And also, if there is if I'm creating a system myself, which often happens because of data engineering, there is that aspect of creating more, extracting more information out of something. So, for example, there are two tools similar to Jira that allow you to measure how well a software developer is performing, or software developer teams are performing. Now, the thing is that they're still limited in terms of how much reporting they give, but the data is available. So you can do a bit more on that data. Now, often I actually end up doing that sort of work. And in that, the only reason why I'm doing that is because it actually provides a huge value for the company that I'm working with. That how could you optimize your developers' time? Because the developers' time is one of the most important, because developers' salaries are one of the highest salary bands after the C-suite. So that is a massive, that's basically the argument. You have to optimize developers' time. And the way you do that is you measure how they're working and how well they're working. And sometimes the systems like Jira and the software engineering software engineering development softwares that allow you to, things like Jira, that basically allow you to measure, not measure, but allow you to create tickets and see how the tickets are moving and manage the development of softwares. Those are sometimes limited in terms of providing you the data you need. And you have to basically extract the data, and then you have to do a bit more of your own calculation to extract the right sort of numbers. And that's basically, so what I would say is the catalyst is the time and money at the end of the day.
So the pain, there's too much pain, and they decide to do something about it. So
yeah, that's the other one. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
We've been like exploring kind of how to answer this question, and it ties it a lot, and just how to sell process management software or process management services, right? And the thing that we've been kind of honing in on and really, really liking is it comes from gap selling. So we've been kind of using gap selling as our sales methodology. And basically, gap selling is like about identifying a value gap that exists in a business. And so you kind of like look at like the current state of the business or the team or the process. You look at the future potential state that you could get that process to. That could be through technology or through just improving the way that it's done, through training, through hiring, like whatever. You look at like, okay, what's the value gap there? So what's like the potential gain the business will get, and that's going to be different depending on the process, but you're trying to like understand, this is the current state, you're closing 10 customers a month. What if you closed 11? Or like you got 10 people working on this, and they're doing, 100, clients per month. What if you do 150? Or what if you only need 7 people or whatever? Like, what's that gap? And then that's kind of like the total value gap. And then you kind of look at like the cost of implementation, which is, the time it will take to kind of like implement, the people, the hours they work, any change management costs, as well as like the cost of the actual system itself. And then you kind of have like your net gap. And basically, if the net gap is big enough, that value gap is big enough, that will and that becomes like the gap, it becomes like a kind of high enough in ROI or like return for the business to kind of prioritize as something that they should do, that business, that department, that team, then that can create the kind of urgency and momentum for them to take action, right? Sometimes they're aware that there's a gap, because they're aware that this thing's running really inefficiently, or there's a lot of problems, so they're getting low quality work, or but sometimes they're not aware, and sometimes they need to be educated on like, hey, like maybe you don't realize, but like this is your current state, but this could be your future state if we put a little bit of work into it. And so it's about kind of trying to work with those customers to help find that value gap. And once that value gap is realized, and if the gap is big enough, that will create a compelling event for them to take action. But different people get to understanding that gap differently.
Mm.
And the gap is different for different businesses, right?
Yeah, really interesting. Like, visualizing, trying to help them visualize that. I mean, that there's so much in. It's almost like coaching, isn't it? You're almost trying to like help them sort of like get a vision of where they are, the grow model, where they are, like, well, the goal and the reality. So then the options, and then try and look at the will to go on that journey. Yeah, super interesting. Funny how sales and coaching are quite similar, but Kelly, like if we look at almost like the polarization of this. Does anyone want to comment on the gap thing, or are you happy to? Okay. So if we look at polarization, any thoughts on a sort of shiny new toy syndrome?
Yeah, I think it goes back to this thing of there's too much available now. So, it's weighing up do I keep what I have now, or do I implement this new tool? So this is kind of like opposite to what we were talking about earlier on about the difficulties businesses have with implementing systems. But when you have good systems in place, you start thinking, okay, well, I've got to be continuously improving the way that I do things, which is good practice. But this shiny new object syndrome thing comes in where you think, oh, okay, well, yeah, there's this amazing new CRM that does all these things but in most cases, actually, you could better off stick with what you have now, as long as the tool that you're working with is proactive. They're releasing new features. They've got a good customer support team. There's proactiveness on their part, which means that they're trying to retain their customer base rather than you moving to something else, which is you've got to get used to the way that you're doing things. You've got to retrain your staff. You've got to move everything over. You've got to reintegrate everything. So I think, yeah, proceed with caution if you're thinking, oh, okay, my mates just told me that there's this new CRM or this new like Zane says, new email tool on the market, which, on the flip side, yeah, definitely proceed with caution. And I just wanted to add something to what was being said earlier. I think one of the things that a lot of businesses do have in mind that kind of is a catalyst for them looking for new systems is sometimes it's a case of people within the company are complaining because there's lack of productivity. They're losing staff because of lack of engagement. There aren't proper ways of doing things. People are confused. There are lots of errors happening repeatedly. All of those kind of things are also, I think, catalysts, which, eventually whoever's responsible for the change management in the business is thinking, well, we can't go on like this because we know that we have problems that are on a baseline and we need to sort all of those things out. So I think that's definitely something that energizes businesses to do things better.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kelly. Anyone want to jump in or?
No.
Okay. So I guess this is sort of a bit of, an open question to the panel, but in my mind, there's sort of the automate stage is what people think they want, but there's almost defining and refining and then delegating or automating. Like there's steps before that. How do you handle that when you sort of see people basically saying we want to automate? Like how do you manage that when you're working with businesses?
Can I answer that one?
Yeah.
I always, whenever somebody comes to me and says, I want to automate my business, the first thing that I say is, okay, we can't just automate everything in your business. There's some things that should be automated and there's some things that shouldn't be automated. And you can't automate something that is inefficient. So if you automate something that is inefficient, it's going to magnify that inefficiency. That's actually a Bill Gates quote. So going back and looking at the systems that you've got in place, are they the right systems for your business? Do they do what you want them to do? And if they don't do what you want them to do, can you optimize them? Are there better features that you're not using to make the most of them? And if that system is not appropriate, then we need to find new systems that are going to make things better for your business. And with that in mind, we also have to streamline and make the processes more efficient before we can automate. So automation really should be the absolutely last thing a business should be doing. We need to go back to scratch, look at the systems, improve those, streamline and improve the processes, document them, have a better way of working, and then you automate. Because actually, ultimately, that saves a lot of time with the automation side, because if you go back to basics, you probably don't have to automate as much as you would if you didn't look at that part.
Yeah, you don't have to re-automate. Yeah, I have a good bit for this. So Elon Musk has this framework that he uses. It's called his 5 engineering principles. And this is kind of how he goes about building everything. And we kind of train a lot of our customers to think about designing their processes. We have kind of a slightly modified version of this, but I'll tell you Elon's. So Elon's 5 engineering principles. Principle 1, make requirements less dumb. So do you really need to do this thing in this complex way, right? Or can you just kind of simplify your approach to how you're doing this completely? Do you need to over-engineer this from the beginning? Principle 2, this is in order. This is kind of how you want to think about analyzing or improving a process in some way. Try very hard to delete the part or process. So the second part is, do you even need to do this at all? Can you just not do this? Can you throw it away and not have it be something on your to-do list? 3 is simplify and optimize. So can you make this simpler than it currently is? Step 4 is accelerate cycle time. So 1 is kind of make things simpler. Then 2 is, can you speed up the speed that you're actually getting this task done when it's a recurring task? And once you've kind of gone through all those 4 steps, then step 5 is automate. Now you've kind of really kind of got this to its core, most important first principles. You've taken away any of the cruft, any of the fluff. You've iterated on it multiple times manually. You've tried to make it more higher quality. You tried to make it faster. And once you've kind of really tightened all of that, then you can stick it into automation. But until you've really refined that process, you don't think about automating it.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, and I think another thing to add to that, which I think Hugo and Danae were talking about earlier on, was about involving your team, making sure that the right people, you have everybody involved. So it's not just about adoption, for new systems and processes. It's trying to understand what people do things differently in the roles that they play within the company, because that really also impacts in how you should be changing things, and then what you should be automating.
Yeah, so the ownership, the sense of ownership from within the team. Yeah, brilliant. Hugo, Zane, any thoughts on this?
Only I couldn't have put what Kelly and Vinay said better. Automation is the final thing. Get your stepping stones right and then pave over the top, kind of thing. The only other thing, which is sort of not unrelated to Mr. Musk's points, is I quite often go through with business owners the 7 types of waste from lean. And although that was originated from sort of manufacturing and so on, it's also quite applicable when you're looking at all the steps, trying to highlight things that are unnecessary or wasted or could be done better. It's just another way of sort of getting people to think about it. But no, I think those guys captured it perfectly.
Yes, same. Basically, You've covered everything, Kelly and Vinay. It's basically exactly what I was going to say. The only thing I was going to actually add is in terms of efficiencies, it goes back to money, it goes back to finance. You have to sort of, with any process, when you eliminate a part, you're most likely saving a huge amount of money. I was once working with, there was one problem I was solving where there was an API call happening every minute for 1 hour, so 60 times, and it only needed to happen once. Someone had messed up some sort of like a scheduler. And the thing is that by just changing it back to just once every 24 hours, we were able to save 120K per year. So it's just a very small change of eliminating what's not necessary. It saves so much money. So yeah, that's automation should definitely come right at the end.
Brilliant, thank you. So look, final, home straight right now. We've got about sort of 5 minutes or so left. Let's dig into like how do you excite, for founders and people listening today, like how do you excite them to try and go on a systems and sort of process led journey? I'll start with Hugo and we'll come back round. So
I think for me it's about selling to business owners the concept of more time, more control over what's going on, the ability to step back and leave the business as and when they want to. But one of the other things are all the things from a system. You get the initial benefit, as in whatever it is happens, as in your sales process happens. But what the other benefits, so once you've done that system, it's automated. 6 months on, suddenly you've got 6 months data, and you can go, oh, well, hang on it. Why is it that such a salesman is achieving that much more than someone else? Or why is it that this bloke, over sells extra or whatever? And all those other little metrics that can be drawn from it that enable you to make strategic decisions about how to develop your business. It might be a simple case of, well, you're really much better as a salesperson, so let's write down and use your script, and then we roll that on to everyone else. It's all those secondary benefits to having robust systems, I think, that often business owners or system implementers or whatever don't quite appreciate.
Awesome, great, thanks, Hugo. Vinay?
So I think one of the things I mentioned before is like helping understand the value gap. Like, what are you actually missing out on if you if you don't move on implementing or upgrading the system, and kind of like making that clear and agreed upon. And in some cases, maybe there isn't a big enough value gap, and maybe that is not the right priority for the business. Maybe the priority for the business is not like implement processes. Maybe it's go get more customers. And actually, a lot of the time, that probably should be the priority for a lot of businesses. They shouldn't be worrying about operations. They should just be worrying about getting more in the kind of like top line. So identifying the value gap, I think, is one. I think some of the stuff we kind of already talked about, like saving time, setting yourself up for growth, being able to step away from the business, not being kind of overwhelmed, and just kind of selling on kind of those principles. And then another one that I'll throw out that's a little bit controversial is like selling on fear. So this is usually around risk. So compliance risk, health and safety risk of getting bad reviews on Glassdoor. There's like different kind of like downsides that can happen for not having good processes and systems in place, and that can be another way to get somebody put a little fire under them and get them moving.
Great, yeah. And interesting that the point you make there, Vinny, because I kind of see, like, generally in a business it's product, promote, process, then people. So you kind of there's things that need to happen before you start building systems, but if you can start out with a systems mindset, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. But if you add too many people before you've got your systems defined, then you're that's really hard to unpick as well. So Kelly?
I'm just going to keep mine really short and sweet and use some catchphrases. Work smarter, not harder. Reduce costs. save time, stay agile, be scalable. That's to me a good summary of the benefits of having good systems.
We'll have to get t-shirts with that on, Kelly. That's great.
Yeah, well, getting there.
Excellent. Okay, really good. Zane?
So I would say basically, if you've seen James Clear's book Atomic Habits, I think it's all about small things. So just focus on improving 1% at a time, and that's it. If you try to say, oh, I need this system, this system, this system, I need all of these things, I need to do them all by the end of this week, that's not going to happen. Nothing will happen. And so it's all about just one improvement at a time, one small improvement at a time. That's it.
Great.
I was just going to say, when you're winning on a project, is that when the employees keep coming to you, they're chasing you, saying, "Oh, can you do this? Can you add this? Can you change this?" Rather than it being you pushing new updates and stuff to them. When they're properly engaged, when they keep coming to you and asking for new things. I suppose. I guess I'm slightly off topic, but just that came from.
No, really relevant. I would have liked to sort of talk about trends. Is there any I know the no code trend is really taking hold. Anything else anyone wants in a very short sentence add into that?
I would say no code is doing really well. It's really picking up. It's great. The other thing which is really similar is basically the APIs that allow you to do AI. So there's obviously, as you might know, big companies, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, they have the money, they have billions, and they have data centers. They can do machine learning on a large scale, and they can create models that will, even if they don't succeed now, they will eventually succeed because they just have so much money to spend. Whereas for smaller companies, it's much more difficult to compete and iterate in the same sort of level. However, what's really great is that Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook have APIs. And they are trained on their large data sets, trained through, I guess, billions of dollars worth of salaries paid to amazing machine learning engineers. So that's the other thing I would say that's amazingly great. So AI APIs are really taking off, and they are really powerful. And it's a great way to enable AI on your systems, or use AI quickly, basically, without any risk of spending too much money and not getting the models right and tweaking and everything.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, and they're actually pretty easy to access and use. You can use them through Zapier and stuff. A lot of them is pretty cool.
Great stuff.
One
so
trend
in the last minute, so 20 seconds each. Bit of a joke question, but look, it's really hard to answer this. What if there's one system that you think every business should have? What is it and why? And we'll start with Vinny.
I mean, obviously, I got to say Process Street, but no. I mean, the basic one is probably payroll. I would say is the most important system for most companies.
Awesome. Okay, great. Hugo?
I have no idea. That's a mean question. I can't answer that. Just one system. The most important thing, I'd say. I guess anything that engages with the people. If the people are engaged and working well and know what they're doing, then everything else kind of follows. But you can have all the best systems in the world, but if anything people orientated or HR orientated isn't there, then you've lost.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Sorry for putting you on the spot on that one, Zane.
Yes, similar to what Hugo mentioned. I think it all depends on the business requirements. So I don't think there's a single system, because it might be that some companies require one problem might be bigger than the other, so we don't know. I would say that it should be focused on whatever the problem is.
There's no problem bigger than getting paid. Try getting anybody to do anything if they don't get paid.
Are you giving us a hint into where you're going next? Fraser Street. Brilliant. Kelly?
I'm going to flip it on its head a little bit. I think that every business has different needs, and I don't think that there's a one size fits all for any business. But I think one thing that is critical to a business is, because we know that so many businesses actually fail within their first 1 or 2 years, not having an accurate system that shows you your financial performance and having good finance figures really hinders businesses in growth. But saying that, if you don't have good other systems that feed into your finance system, you're never going to get good figures because they're never going to be accurate. So
awesome. Okay, well, look, brilliant. Thanks so much, guys. So look, implementing systems is a human challenge. It's the tech meets like humans that intersect on the Venn diagram. How do we, get it to, how do we get us to work together? Just enough is enough with systems often. Involve your team, get them involved, and don't automate until you have an efficient system. So next Wiser Wednesday will be on revenue rockets. So if you've got any questions for the panelists today, reach out. I'm sure like LinkedIn, but be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you so much to the panelists. It's been brilliant to hear your your worldviews and what's going on in systems in your space. Thank you to everyone for listening. Hope you feel slightly wiser this Wednesday, and see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.